never try to hire people in your own image, because you've been successful in an organization at a period of time. But sometimes the person who comes in needs to change the organization.
Do you think that people that lead companies really care as much as they should about culture?
Not many companies know what the cost of churn is. And I think that's the biggest risk to companies. It's not just the churn itself, it's the cost of churn. And the cost of churn is not just the replacement cost, it's the disruption. Every time someone comes in, you've got to reteach them. That sucks up other people's time.
Today's guest is Jonathan Holmes, and I really wanted to get him here to come and share his expertise and show us all the steps that we could take, the things we need to think about, and how we can improve our businesses, or as employees, improve our opportunities. Had my kids gone into an apprenticeship instead of going to university, had they gone essentially straight into the workplace, would that have been better for them?
What people make of themselves is up to them. If you're determined enough, focused enough, you will go a long way. Now, having a great brand of university on your CV does not make you successful. You make yourself successful.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of the podcast. Before I start, question for you. Have you subscribed? Do you follow? Or do you just randomly take this podcast out every time you feel it? I really need your help. It would mean so much to me if you're watching this on YouTube right now and you could click the subscribe button, or if you're on Spotify or any other podcasting app where you can press the follow button. If you do, it means I get a bigger audience that then means that I can get bigger, better guests for you. Now, I say this as a request. I promise you I will do my absolute best to bring better and better quality people to you. I just need you to press that button, follow or subscribe. It will help me out so much. All right, enough of the requests. Onto the show. Please welcome Jonathan Holmes. This episode is proudly sponsored by Allsopp Allsopp Mortgage Brokers, the leaders in Dubai real estate. Whether you're a first-time buyer, a seasoned investor, or looking to refinance, Allsopp Allsopp's dedicated mortgage team will expertly guide you every step of the way, ensuring a seamless and stress-free journey. Now, with over 16 years of experience, they offer exclusive access to the UAE's best rates, personalized advice, and tailored financing solutions that perfectly suit your needs, leaving you free to focus on finding your dream home. And that's what we want. Experience the difference with Allsopp Allsopp, your trusted partner in securing the perfect mortgage solution. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming to join us today.
Pleasure. Good for you.
Now, we've got this kind of like business conversation that's going to take place today, but our audience love to get to know who my guests are and a little bit about their background. So before we go into business, let's just go back to the beginning of your journey. You said to me earlier on you were a geologist.
That's a very long time ago.
Kind of sounds like a fancy thing, someone that deals with gemstones and fancy stuff. Is that really what happened?
I guess not for me. I mean, geology was a passion I had probably, in my teens. And to be honest, I have absolutely no reason or knowledge why I got into it. I mean, I would claim I'm not an academic. I have some level of dyslexia. So, and probably when I was at school, I don't think they ever realized that. I don't think they ever said, you've got a problem. The fact that my spelling was shocking never seemed to click to my school that maybe I had a different issue. But, so I did my O levels, did my A levels. Geology was the one which I really enjoyed. And I suspect part of it was because if you do geology, rocks are outside. Mountains are outside, rivers are outside. So you actually spend a lot of time sitting there with a hammer in the middle of Wales, talking to sheep, banging on rocks. And actually I enjoyed it. I actually sort of felt that was something which was, something I could do, and I enjoyed it. It got me out of a classroom. And actually I just developed a passion for geology. And I still have it. I mean, ironically, my wife hates me for it. But if I go to the UK, and I'm there on holiday for maybe a week or so, I'm down in the South Coast, I will absolutely guarantee I will go down to the South Coast where there's huge fossils.
Yeah.
And I'll take my wife along, I'll take my hammer along, and I'll go and knock some fossils out of a cliff.
What were those places we used to go to? I remember them. It was on the South Coast.
Lulworth Cove, yes.
Lulworth?
Ludworth, is it Ludworth?
Ludworth Cove.
It's the Jurassic Coast.
Yeah. I remember we used to do geography field trips down there when we were younger.
See, you're the same. You field trips, and I love my field trips. I actually sat in my degree. I did my degree in geology. I remember I had to sit in Wales for about 2 weeks in the summer on my own, doing geological mapping of some mountains in Wales. And literally, you do it with a group. You've got about 5 or 6 people there, but every day you go out on your own. You take your hammer, you take your lunch, and you go and map a hill. And the sad thing is that you end up talking to sheep because there is no one else to talk to, and you sit for 8 hours and hitting rocks with a hammer. Sheep are quite nice.
Okay, right. So how do we go from geology to executive search and the people business? How on earth does someone move from that complete different, strange, unusual type of industry into something that everybody knows about?
I maybe a different, but even today it's quite similar. I mean, I don't believe when I was going into this industry, there are many people who said, you know what, I want to go and do search. I don't think people woke up in the morning and thought, you know what, I see myself as a search consultant. It wasn't part of career planning. It wasn't, if you were coming out of your university and you go and see the careers department, I don't think it was not on their list. It just wasn't there. And I think that's maybe going back a few years and that's maybe from when I was coming out. So most people who I ever talk to who get into the industry, by and large, get in by mistake or default or some irrational reason. And that was for me. I mean, I was a geologist. I was doing a bit of geology. I didn't really enjoy civil engineering geology. And to be honest, all my mates were working in the city. They were all with banks. And I thought that was very nice. That's how I could wear a suit and I could look smart. And there I was, the geologist wearing, jeans and a t-shirt. So I went down to the City of London. This is in the UK. And talked to a firm that was a recruitment firm. And I said to them, walked in the door, I was 23 years old or something. I said, I want to work in banking. And they probably looked at me and thought, idiot. But they said, you know what? Why not? But we've got a better idea. You come and work for us, learn about banking, do recruitment for banks, understand what they're like, which departments you don't like, which departments you do like, and maybe after a year or so, you'll decide what you want to do and go and work for banking. And so through that, introduction to a recruitment firm, it was a contingent recruitment firm, they said, come and work for them. And that's how I got in and I never got out.
You've been there ever since. Now, you've lived in many countries, and I look at recruitment as an industry that, I mean, expat recruitment's always been a little bit different to me. It's like people being recruited, like living in London, working in London, and then people being recruited to go and live in faraway lands,
Very exotic.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's exotic, sometimes not. I remember when I lived in Nigeria for a period of time, and there were these guys being recruited for these big oil and gas companies. And it was like, yeah, you're going to go to Nigeria. The package is you work, 6 months on, 1 month off. So you get extra holidays, you get paid more because it's a hardship posting, but it's great for your career. And you'd have these people down there that they didn't seem to fit in to anywhere else in society. But they fit in quite well in an environment like that. When I think about this place, obviously we're living in Dubai now and it's all wonderful and great, but Dubai once was a hardship posting, I can imagine too.
I think many places have been hardship postings and have evolved. And I was one of those people who actually wants to be in geology. I was trying to be a wireline logger, which is what is actually you analyze chips that come up a log. And that was something you normally did 2 on, 2 off. And I thought that was a fantastic job. And I could work for 2 weeks and go traveling for 2 weeks. I never actually did that. But yes, I mean, the expats, I think the expats are a bit of a misnomer these days. I think it harks back to an age when people were sort of expatriated from their country and, government service and work in these places. I think these days people who are working abroad are part of their career. It's a mobility program. It's often incentive. Go and say, look, go and spend 6 months working in America. I genuinely think, and anyone who ever asks me, how do you structure a career? How do you map out someone's career? If I'm trying to give advice, I'd say, look, I think international postings are very important. I think people learn more by being posted outside their comfort zone, by working in a foreign culture, by being exposed to different environments, different working systems. I think you learn more doing that in a few weeks than you learn in a couple of years in the country of origin. So I always encourage that if someone's looking at a career, they should try to get some part of that exposed to an international role. Now, it may be posting, it may be a long-term one. Some, like you and me, take it extreme and have done it for decades. And there's no right or wrong, but I think that experience of working outside your country of origin, I think, is extremely important.
You went to Russia. That would have been, back then in 1993, a very unusual place to go for your average Joe. To be going an expat posting, you'd have been likely, if you could, you'd be maybe a Frankfurt, maybe a Geneva, but Moscow, that's a long way for a lot of people to think about because of the Iron Curtain and the communisms and everything that went on then. So I look at someone that goes and does that as brave,
or stupid, or naive. Where's Russia?
Yeah,
a ticket. Okay, I'll go there.
When I first moved overseas, I went to the Far East, and my friends in London, in the city where I was working, were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, but there's less tax over there, and they pay more money, so it'd be a good opportunity." And they're like, "Yeah, but what about everyone here? What about your life?" And to me, it was like, "Well, this is a great sense of adventure for me." But a lot of people don't understand that there are real cultural challenges when you go and work in a foreign country and in a business with lots of different nationalities to cope with. I mean, here's a great example of going into a company and you'll see Indians, Filipinos, Brits, Dutch, you'll see Arabs, from different of the Arab countries, and this kind of melting pot of different cultures that people have to try and kind of adapt to. But I remember when I went to live in Brazil, well, Brazilians didn't speak English. And I'm in this office and I can't communicate with anybody. And I've got this job to do and I'm trying to be responsible. And I knew very quickly I was going to have to learn this language really, really fast to be able to get anywhere. And I don't think I ever mastered it. And you may have experienced this with Russian in Moscow. It's like, I don't think I mastered it, but it was a real commitment to learn that language so that I could be valuable in that business. But then I became valuable to other businesses because now not only was I British and Western and whatnot, and I could bring that to the table. Oh, you speak Portuguese. And so I was adding feathers to my bow as I was going through that as well. When you look at the people that you've worked with over the years and the challenges that they face, is it hard for international companies to find really good people to go and work with them in different countries around the world? Is that a real challenge?
I think it appeals to a certain breed of person, in my opinion. I think there are those who have a very, very strong comfort zone where they are and just they're not interested. And that's fine. And that's, people choose their lives in some respects. Now, I think there are those who are, keen to get exposure. I mean, when I went to Russia, I was in the UK, I was in London. The time my boss said, look, we need to set up a business in Eastern Europe. Russia's the first point. Would you want to go there? I said, I was 29. I thought, why not? I mean, at that age, I wasn't married. I didn't have real dependencies in the UK. So it was a very easy, from my point of view, it was a very easy decision. They gave me a suitcase, they gave me a ticket. I went into Moscow. We didn't have a business there. We didn't have anyone there. It was post-perestroika, so it was after the 91 Yeltsin change. And I had a grotty Soviet hotel room, which is my office. It was my living room. It was my bed. It was everything. And it's a great experience to learn. I mean, you get thrown in the deep end and you have to learn. You have to build a business. We built a business over 4 years. It was about the fourth biggest country in Europe. Now, I caveat that with I benefited because Russia was in an absolute boom. As my boss said, the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I just had to sit there and success would come to me. But you learn. I had three of my clients killed in Russia at that time. It was the only country I had a gun put to my head in a 5-star hotel coffee shop. So, you learn these things as you go through, and maybe I wouldn't relive that type of experience today. I don't think, a US public company as I work for would probably allow me to go through that experience. We were a partnership firm in those days. But I think those type of experiences teach you a hell of a lot. And it isn't necessarily around just business. It's around how do you build something in a foreign culture with learning different experiences. And let's face it, every country I've been to, I've made mistakes. I've made big cultural mistakes. And, I always say, look, I'm going to make mistakes. They teach me. When I do something wrong, they help me. And you learn a lot.
When we think about recruitment and executive search, and we think about those big names, the Korn Ferry, your business stands out as one of the big boys in that group. But I think that a lot of people won't necessarily know what Korn Ferry does outside of them being a recruitment company. And I think a lot of the time, companies, when they look to recruit, I don't know, a CTO, a CEO, whatever it may be, think about it from a completely different point of view to how an organization like you would look at it. So let's just take an example. I'm looking for a CEO of my business. My business has been operating for a number of years. I need someone to come in because I need to replace myself. There's nobody within the business that I can find to do that. And so I go out to a headhunting company and say, right, I need someone special. Okay. I need someone that's this, and this to come and take over the business. But I'm terrified of letting the reins go because I've built it and it's my baby. And, I want someone to come in that's got exactly the same qualities and characteristics as me, and I want them to have exactly the same amount of drive and the care and compassion that they need to have, and I want them just to be like me. Can I clone myself, please? Is that something that's a frustrating thing to hear from people in your business?
I don't think it's frustrating. It's the absolute reality. Let's face it, and we always say, never try to hire people in your own image, because you've been successful in an organization at a period of time. But sometimes the person who comes in needs to change the organization. And so cloning, the CEO to be exactly the same as the person we're trying to replace is never going to work. And obviously our role as consultants is to help guide and advise organizations through what is very difficult process. Hiring a new CEO or a very senior leader or on the board has strong material impact on the success of a business. That is an appointment that can make or break an organization. There are countless examples through history of how a CEO has come in and really made a company or come in and destroyed a company. So no organization goes into that type of decision lightly, or should they? And, it is best to get external professional advice on what is the journey. And it is a journey. It's a long process. I think the idea that you say, I want a new CEO, we go, right, no problem. We'll go off and pick up the phone a few mates and that's the job done, is obviously not true. And I think it is a case of sitting with the vested parties, and maybe a board, it may be you yourself as an owner, and just talking through the journey and understanding what are your goals in your business. Why do you want to achieve this? What's the ambition of the business? What sort of person is going to be right to be able to achieve these particular strategic agenda of the business going forward? And in many cases, we'll actually sit with the organization and say, well, why do you not have someone within your business already? Because most organizations and any board of any public company has a specific mandate that they must find succession within the business. So every CEO has candidates or should have candidates within the organization who are defined successors. And then every N-1 level below the CEO in an organization must have a defined successor. I have a defined successor to my role. My boss has a defined successor to her role. So we really are responsible as an organization to really help and guide businesses through a journey to bring in professionals. And it is a consulting exercise, and we will talk to stakeholders within the business, we'll talk to the board, we'll talk to people in the business itself. We'll understand if it's a public company, we'll go and talk to analysts and understand what their view of the business is. And we'll look at their competitive group, we'll look at organizations that they want to mirror and match going forward, and look at the criteria and competencies, traits, drivers of individuals that will make that business successful going forward. And so it is it's a complicated process. And I think that's when you look at the broad definition of recruitment, it is a spectrum from the chairman of a board to a CEO, which is a very high touch consulting process, to an individual who is at a vital many level, who's, as a role is at the lower end of the business, where obviously you don't invest quite so much time. It's a lesser touch process. And to be honest, technology is, at the lower levels, technology is increasingly supplementing businesses to do that. So when we look at what we do, we work from the senior level right down to the junior levels through what we call RPO, Recruitment Process Outsourcing, which is a BPO business. And that is really a technology company. It really, when you're hiring for an organizations, we do 10, 15, 20,000 people a year, you can't do that with humans alone. The only way you can do that is applying technology that sifts through vast amounts of public domain information to sort out keywords in LinkedIn and things and sift that out and identify people who could be right.
We've seen AI become a conversation over the last few years, and the fear factor around it is becoming clearer and clearer. It's louder and louder. Your job's going to be replaced. Just in the news the other day, we saw Mark Zuckerberg saying that we're getting rid of 10,000 people over at Meta. You're hearing this kind of stuff, and it makes people worry. And it makes people worry because they're like, well, what's going to happen to my job and my career? And I think it was described well some time ago with autonomous vehicles. It's like, what are truck drivers going to do when trucks become autonomous?
Yeah.
And somebody said to me, well, they're going to learn to do something else and become valuable in that way. Otherwise, they're going to have a miserable life living on income support. When you think about how AI is impacting businesses, the companies that I see that are making money out of AI are the people that are selling AI at the moment. So those share prices are rocketing for those companies that are providing that. And obviously we saw what happened with the Chinese company last week and all that stuff. And Nvidia's stock was affected. But when do you think AI is going to impact organizations in a way that's going to enable them to severely reduce their headcount, and these roles are going to genuinely be replaced? Or do you think there's a little bit of hype right now, and maybe it's a little bit further away than we think?
It's both, without trying to sit on the fence. I had this, clearly in any organization, this conversation's happening every day. A year ago, it wasn't every day. I think today, and I think 2025 is a year when we're going to see an accelerated application and use of AI and technology. So I absolutely see this as something which is increasing in the volume. And we're talking about it, a lot, because I think the application and use of a technology is going to be critical for businesses. Is it going to replace people? Yes, it will. It will in certain, and then for the first time, as everyone says, it's actually not destroying the lower level roles. It's destroying or may change the white collar workforce in a way which, if you're doing a conveyancing contract in a house, AI can do it. You don't necessarily need the lawyer hours you would typically use to do that, as a sort of very basic example. So yes, it will have an impact on the labor force. But I think to your point on the truck driver who reskills and is redeployed, there needs to be a lot of thinking going, how do you redeploy people? Because you can't have vast amounts of people underemployed or underutilized or out of work, because it has a very sort of detrimental effect on society. So I do think that technology and AI specifically will have a great impact and an increasing impact. And I think this year is the year we will begin to see that accelerate, because it will start to be deployed in a far more active way through businesses as they find ways to say, how do we do documentation? How do we write reports? How do we create strategy papers that are really structured through technology and then supplemented through humans? And it isn't replacing humans, but the human hours put into creating a 2025 annual operating plan strategy report. I'm writing an annual report at the moment this weekend, and yes, I'm going to use technology. Yes, I'm going to use AI because I need it to do it, he, she, whatever technology is. I need it to take the heavy lifting out of it so that I can get the structure done, and then I will do it myself. So it will have a big impact. And I think it will change from country to country, from industry to industry. And industries will start adopting it in different ways. So I think the people who've made money selling it will make more money selling even more. The companies who are deploying it will find ways to increase productivity. Increased productivity may obviously result in less or smaller workforce.
When I look at AI, I think you mentioned something that I thought was quite interesting, that every company, it's being talked about.
A lot of talk, there's action historically.
I wonder what the action is or is going to be, because for me, I'm not a technology person. I own these companies. Arguably, they sit in the SME space. So is every owner or founder or CEO of an SME business, looking at that themselves? And if they're not, should they urgently be looking into that? And if they don't know how to do it themselves, are there good consulting firms out there that you've seen that come in and will do full assessments to businesses and help them understand how AI can be introduced into their company to make it more efficient?
I think it's still too early. I think everyone is learning. I think there's a lot of talk, as we said. But I don't think the application usages have really been fully defined yet, because everyone is still learning. So, and I think the SME part of the ecosystem is probably not the main target, because they tend to be quite lean as an organization. I think it can help them run their businesses more efficiently, but it isn't necessarily going to help remove jobs, because they probably have a very lean structure already. I think where it will have an impact is in larger, broad organizations who have big middle management groups, who often in many cases are slightly under deployed already, and technology can start weaning out, the administrative side, the productivity side will increase. And I think that's the impact will be on larger companies, I think, than small companies.
One part of your business is bringing people into companies, so recruiting for them. Another part of your business is understanding businesses. And I think a lot of the time we forget, not how do you recruit people, but how do you keep people? Here in this part of the world, we hear figures bandied around that 1 in 4 people are leaving their jobs every year on average. Well, 25% of the workforce moving sounds like a colossal number. And you'll have some companies saying, well, that doesn't apply to us, and other companies where the number's much greater. I suppose commission-only real estate brokers is probably one of those areas. But when we look at that, do you think that people that lead companies really care as much as they should about culture, care as much as they should about understanding how to get the very best out of people? Or do you think that's very much an afterthought in this part of the world?
I've been here 13 years. And when I first came here 13 years ago, I think the culture was less about the people and more around I think the family businesses have always catered and cared for their workforce in a relatively benign way. They weren't necessarily driving the workforce very aggressively, but they looked after people. But broadly speaking, when I look at the region's evolution in the last 13 years that I have seen it, we have migrated from a region where if someone leaves a role, you just find another one. And someone leaves, I'll find another one. It wasn't deemed to be, this is an asset. This is not human capital, as you would call it. This is not something you should have on your balance sheet as a human. This was someone that is, well, we'll find another one. And therefore, I think the region has evolved from what was like that 13 years ago today, where I think there is a genuine belief that people are an asset. And if I take Saudi specifically, we know that there's a highly competitive workforce in Saudi Arabia. There's a shortage of skilled workers. And I think organizations recognize that if they do not look after people, if they don't understand what their goals are, understand what their aspirations are, what their careers are they enjoying themselves? Do they have a nice working environment? Do they have a collegiate environment? Are they team-spirited? If they do not really focus on that, then they will have high churn. They'll have higher churn. Higher churn is a cost. Not many companies know what the cost of churn is. If you say to a CFO, tell me what the cost of churn was in 24, they'll say, well, no, we had about 23% churn. Well, how much did that actually cost you in dollars or dirham or SAR? No idea. And I think that's the biggest risk to companies, is that it's not just the churn itself, it's the cost of churn. And the cost of churn is not just the replacement cost, it's the disruption. Every time someone comes in, you've got to reteach them. That sucks up other people's time. They haven't got the institutional knowledge.
You've got training, you've got the cost of the recruiter, to find.
Very good.
The time it takes. You've got the HR department spending hours on it. Okay. All of these things apply that aren't considered. You're probably going to have to pay someone more than you were paying the last person as well. So you've got an increased salary as well.
Yeah.
So all of these things apply, and it's not cheap. I mean, the numbers that I've been told are, if someone's on $50,000 a year as a salary, let's keep it very simple. Okay. It probably will cost you $100,000 to replace them if you consider the time, effort, and energy involved just to get someone to do exactly the same job. Replace from
you should come and talk to our clients. Hey, listen to you. You said it. It's so compelling.
But I look at that and I'm like, do you get that? You know, I look at companies like, do you really understand the cost of doing this? Because if you've got 100 people in your company and you lost 10 of them, and they know who's the most dangerous person to leave? Well, C-suite are the people we fear losing the most.
Everyone's a call. Everyone is a loss.
But yeah, absolutely. But a lot of companies will say these people at the top, we're scared of losing the most. And it's like, well, what impact will they have on performance of the business if they're not there? They resign, they give their 3 months notice. You've now got the egg time has turned over, and you've now got to find somebody, okay, recruit a good person, bring them into the business, train them and develop them so that there's essentially a switch that takes place smoothly. No chance.
Well, there is a chance, but not many companies take it. You need to plan for all these eventualities. If you have an amazingly smooth running organization, every role has succession. Everyone is trained and developed to a point where they're ready to take on the next level. Everyone has been assessed to identify their skills gaps so that you fulfill those gaps to make them relevant for the role ahead. Everyone has got a compensation reward system that is actually applied to them, makes them happy and keeps them engaged. So there are ways, if you're a CHRO of a business, you can really start to apply, how do I future-proof my business? Most organizations work for today and tomorrow. But actually not many say, look, what eventualities do we need to think about to make our organizations secure, safe, and well operated for the next 5 years? And it is possible to create a better organization. And I think the region here has never done it in the past. I think we're beginning to look at organizations that start doing it.
I've got to challenge this. We've got corporate clients that 4 years ago had 10 employees that have now got 1,500. When companies are growing as quick as many of those companies are growing over here, how it seems to me that would be a difficult challenge to have succession planning when you have such growth that's taking place just here.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I think you're right. With this region's gone through this, euphoric growth. It's been amazing. It's been tremendous. It's creating new economies. We're building new industries. We're building things which just didn't exist 5-6 years ago, which I think it creates that stress in the business. It creates that demand for talent. It creates the demand for knowledge economy workers. So you've got to you've got to create EV value propositions for why people should come to the region. And so you're absolutely right. Growth is a period of a time in an organization which is very disruptive. It doesn't give you the time. You haven't got the bandwidth to create these systems that make this organization. And so organizations, and we look at organizations through different phases. You look at organizations through a startup phase, growth phase, then you look at the stabilization, and then you look at, probably an event which may be a public listing or a change of ownership or an exit of some kind. So organizations have very different phases of evolution. And yes, I talk about systemization of a business when it's more moving into steady state. And that's the phase you have to look at, because that's when the risk is, because that's when you're no longer just growing and growing and growing. You've got to protect your asset. You've got to protect your people. In the growth phase, you're absolutely right. It is difficult because you just don't have time.
Do people in CHRO, so HR director roles, let's keep it simple language, no terminology, do they see companies like you as an ally, or often an outsourced service just trying to sell your wares to their business? What's across the board? I mean, I know you have pros and cons, but how do HR directors look at people that do what you do?
I mean, as an organizational consulting firm, we do help organizations become successful through people. So someone who's an HR director whose core role is looking at the human capital of the business, the people in the company, will see us as an organization of strong support, because we help them build reward programs that retain people. We help them build leadership programs and development programs that increase the skills of their people. So, we're there to help build capacity and capability through people. And so if you're the HR director, I would genuinely assume that Korn Ferry is there for good, not for bad. Now, you could argue, well, if the search bit of our business, the executive search business, comes along and takes your CEO away, that's seen as negative. But I would argue, why has the CEO accepted a role outside? Maybe because they weren't getting the type of opportunities or the career or the reward or the enjoyment they were expecting from the organization, and the organization should have tried hard to retain them. So there's arguments on both sides of that.
What are the 4 or 5 most important things you find most candidates are looking for when they join a company? Because we think it's money.
We did a my colleague will look at this and say, we've done some analysis. We did a report for 2024, and we've got one for 2025 coming out on looking at why do people leave and why do people join organizations. And obviously, the first one everyone says, is it money? Companies say, is it because of money? And you're right, money is always in the top 4. You can't say it's number 12, number 50, number 100. It is always high. Money does, unfortunately, pay your mortgage or buy your groceries in the shop. So it's there, but it will be rarely seen as number 1. It'll be, we normally do it as the top 5. It will be in the top 5, but, career opportunity. That is, I think, and it depends on the age demographic, and we do the survey looking at different age demographics. Sometimes if you're in your mid to late 40s, early 50s, money comes a little bit higher because you're obviously trying to save for retirement. If you're in your 20s, no. Money is not your driving force. The opportunity of getting into an organization that is great to work for, provides a very good work environment, often provides some flexible working, operating, work from home policy, more outside the region than in the region. In this region, working from home is not necessarily seen quite as a high demand. But the main one is career opportunity. Will this organization take me forward?
And we've got career opportunity, and money's on the list. And what about environment?
A nice place to work. Yes, I mean that's
a nice place to work.
Well, that's collegial. It's got it takes people on outings. It does good CSR. And is the organization, again, depending on the region, is the company good for society? And increasingly, at the younger generation, they want to work for an organization that they believe is good for society, and that, in some levels, is very important to a lot of people.
Donald Trump just got into power recently, and he brought some sweeping executive orders in, and one of them was related to diversity and inclusion and the whole LGBTQ situation. No men in women's sports. People that are in the roles they're in shouldn't be there because of trying to fill a quota, but they're doing the job because they're the very best person to do the job, and that's it, merit-based alone. You must have been exposed to a lot of this over the last 5 or 6 years. Tell me what your take on that is, and how you see it, and how that can positively or negatively impact the workplace.
Well, I think, we call it D&I, we'll call it D&I, there's called different terms, but we'll call it D&I for the sake of here. So, we have a business in D&I. It is one of our solution areas that we help organizations look at diversity and inclusion within their overall business. I think, I genuinely do believe that having a mixed gender organization is important. And I think again, the challenge with always the surveys and reviews is that everyone will challenge something and everyone has different views. I know McKinsey has a view that, a report that says that, companies that have more gender diverse businesses are more successful. So I think, we still have a way to go, and I still think it's important for this region to be more inclusive of women in business. And that, I think,
do you think it's not?
And it's gone, well, again, depending on what time zone you're looking at. If I look at it from 13 years ago, no, I don't think it was, in terms of the way that how many women CEOs were there in the region. how many are there now? There are some. So I think it's moved a long, long way. I mean, I've been obviously going into Saudi for a long time, and from what it was a while ago to what it is today, I think it's an absolute transformation. It's amazing how far they've gone so quickly in bringing women into the workforce, and that I think is transformational. And I think they should be credited with that achievement. But we live in a region which is so multicultural. I mean, we have 32 different nationalities in our business.
Yeah.
And so I think that real that real diversity of culture, I think, is a benefit and good for businesses. Now, I think in other parts of the world, when they get a little bit more extreme, and you've seen in the press, a lot of organizations are dismantling aspects of their D&I policies. I suspect some of it is the more extreme versions of that, which have been driven by agendas which today don't exist because Trump is bringing in a slightly different culture to business. And so I believe the extremes of anything are pretty bad. I think finding a compromise in the middle where you recognize diversity in all its forms is genuinely good. You don't need to take it to extremes. You don't need to get rid of it. And so I think there's a place for it in all businesses at a level which provides opportunity for people of all different styles.
Okay, but let's say I'm using you guys to help me recruit a CEO. All right. And I've been working with you. You've come in, you've understood my business. I'm really grateful for the expert knowledge that you give me. And we've got a bunch of candidates. They've been through 3 or 4 rounds of interviews, men and women. Okay. If I was told I had to choose based on an agenda, that would really annoy me. If my business is about, I need the best CEO. I don't care whether they're tall, short, male, female. I don't care. I care about the best CEO.
Absolutely.
But there are other companies out there and large organizations where that decision hasn't been able to be made.
I think that's not, and I would probably challenge that a little bit as well, because, obviously when we talk to organizations, yes, they will often say, I would like, a woman in this role. Now, we can't magically create these individuals. I mean, obviously we come in, we do
You can't.
Well, that's part of AI's future. That's given 20 years time. But I think we will go in there and say, what does your business need? We will really bring it down to the core analysis of a business and what's going to work for them and bring an executive. Now, when we've done that, we can go into the market and say, look, we can look at women who have these skills. We can look at men who have these skills. We will bring to you as an organization what we believe will be fit for your business. And we will advise you what we think is right. You as the client ultimately make the decision. I cannot make that decision for you. I will give you advice and I'll present you opportunity. And if you say, I want a mixed gender selection, that I can provide. I wouldn't say they're all going to be equally good, but I'll provide that mix. I'll advise you what I think is the best solution, but you will make the decision.
And if I was in London or New York or Hong Kong or Singapore, would I be asking in a different way to Dubai?
No, I think these days it's a fairly broad statement of saying, I will look at anyone who can do the job. And I think that means it's the right thing to say, bring me the best person. I don't care whether it's a man or a woman or whatever. Tell me who can do this role.
And when you look at the outflow of people, wealthy people leaving the UK and other places and moving into this home that we've all created for ourselves here, we can almost snigger a little bit because we knew ahead of time that it was a good place to be. However, is it as real as it appears? Are people really leaving the UK in the same numbers? Are people, because in recruitment, you'd find it hard to find really good people if all the good people were leaving, and you look at London, and I go and visit London, in the summer, and summer in London's amazing. It's a fantastic city, and it's got great energy. And, my wife is not from the UK. She always wants to go to London. Is it just more propaganda than reality from the information you've been able to gather?
It's very difficult to know. I mean, we don't have probably enough data points to say yes or no. And you read about it in the press, but who knows whether that's true or not. There is, though, I suspect, a genuine view that, and this is not just the UK, I think this relates to much of Northern Europe, Whereas, there is a slowing economy. Businesses are not growing so much. When businesses don't grow so much, career opportunities lessen. There is a high taxation environment. The weather sucks in my mind. So, I wouldn't want to go there just for the weather. So there are certain drivers that may push people out. The Middle East and Dubai has a lot of reasons why it's a great draw. And I think there's people come here because of opportunity. Again, when I look at the time I've been here, the reasons that people will come here now is because it's good for their career. The reason they would come here maybe 8 years ago is because they maybe felt that being tax-free would be good for their pension or something. And I think that is a big change for the region.
That's a really important point, isn't it? Yeah. I've been here 20 years. It's like all those years ago, it was tax-free.
Yes.
Oh, well, we're going there because it's tax-free. I've got more money in my back pocket. Now, other career, because I remember this because years ago, people said, don't stay in Dubai too long, Spence, because you'll be pigeonholed as a UAE guy, and that might not help you with your career in other parts of the world. Who's going to want a UAE specialist back in London?
Well, this is absolutely true because, when we advise people would come to us a few years ago and say, look, how does the UAE Dubai look on my CV? Is that something that a company will look at as positive or negative when I go on in my career? And, a few years ago, it was hard to answer that question. Today, I think people globally recognize this region is a region of growth. It's a region of opportunity. You learn things, you develop, you build businesses. Building businesses is a skill. So I think today it's a very, very different scenario. And I think having, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, the Middle East, any of the GCC countries on your CV, I think can be a selling point.
I think you got me thinking there. Let's talk about, because then we've got to lean into university. People are saving, they're getting their kids to the age of 18 and they're sending them off to the US, to the UK, off to great universities because they weren't here. Is tertiary education good enough here? Is it recognized when people see that on a resume now? If they see someone that's been in a university in Dubai and got their degree and whatever that may be, is it equivalent to a decent, not maybe not Oxbridge, but a decent university in the UK?
I would sort of step back a bit and say, how do organizations look at degrees these days? Because that is changing as well. And that's another conversation where we can pile that and talk about that. But I think people still buy brand. People still say, I want to have the MIT, I want to have the Cambridge, I want to have the INSEAD or something on my CV. And they do that because they want the brand. And, organizations may look at it. I don't think they pay so much attention. We can talk a bit about that. But I think, in education here in one of the local universities, is fine because, there are a lot of very good universities here. Look at Abu Dhabi. They've got technology universities, which I think are world class. So I think increasingly, and you look at Qatar, we've got businesses there and universities. So I think there is an increasing level of academic excellence that we're seeing within country. But still, people will still choose in many cases, I believe, to also have tertiary education, whether it be postgraduate or undergraduate internationally.
My kids went to expensive private schools. They went to expensive universities. And I look back on it and I wonder sometimes if I made a really good decision there. Now, a lot of people will say education's everything. But I also look at apprenticeships. And I say to myself, had my kids gone into an apprenticeship instead of going to university, had they gone essentially straight into the workplace, would that have been better for them?
Question?
Yeah.
What people make of themselves is up to them. I think, you can be successful, whatever your education, whatever you've done. And I think if you're determined enough, you're focused enough, you will go a long way. Having a great brand of university on your CV does not make you successful. You make yourself successful. Yes, many will argue that a great brand of university will get you through the door, and I think that's probably true. Now, I went to a good school. As I said, I wasn't the greatest academic, and I have a level of dyslexia which probably didn't help me in life. And my university was not a great university. And I applied for Schlumberger because I was a geologist to do wildlife. I never got in. I applied for accounting courses with it before. And actually, I was cleaning my mother's house out recently, and I was looking through all correspondence, and I found a whole load of letters of applications I'd made to these companies and they say, "Dear Mr. Holmes, thank you for your application. We've read your background with great interest. Go away." And so I think maybe my university didn't get me the access, but I hope that my application of what I think I can do later in jobs has made me successful. So I don't think the university alone will be successful.
When I didn't go to university and when I went to work overseas, I went for a job interview and they didn't employ me. And so they said, "We need people at the age of 25, you're 23, you're too young." So I drove home, sat with my mum and she said, "How did it go? How did it go?" And I'm like, "Yeah." They said no. And she's like, "Why?" I said, "Well, I'm 23 and they want 25-year-olds. I'm too young to go." And she looked at me and she went, "And you're going to take that?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "You get back over there tomorrow morning and you speak to the boss of that company and you tell him what for." Anyway, so I drove back the next morning, a little bit nervous, and I sat for 4 hours in the reception of this company in Dallinghoo near Ipswich. So you will know roughly the area.
Indeed.
Okay. And I sat for 4 hours and eventually the guy, the CEO came and he's like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Your recruitment people wouldn't give me a job and I just want a chance. Can I talk to you?" I spoke to him for a while and he had to go and see his father in hospital who had a heart attack. His father was in the same hospital on the same ward as my grandfather that very same day. And he went with me to the hospital. And in the car on the way to the hospital, he said to me, 2 weeks, and you need to be in Hong Kong, get yourself sorted out. And that's how I got the job. And so yeah, to me, it's just like, you hit the nail on the head with what you say. It's like, yes, going to a great university might get you through the door, but you make your life for yourself. You achieve, nobody's achieving for you. And it's the effort that you put in that will give the desired result of that labor that goes into it. And so a lot of people are waiting, aren't there? A lot of people I find today, there's a sense of entitlement. Whereas before for me, it was roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. I've got 2 daughters, they're in their mid-20s and I just want them to live the life that I lived and look back on the times when it was tough and it was challenging and I was scrapping and, trying to make something of myself. I look back on those times as the best times of my life.
Yeah.
And I just want them to go through that. How is this generation different to us? In the workplace, when it comes to talking to people that do all aspects of what you do, how are they different? And what do I, as a 55-year-old CEO, need to be aware of?
It's really difficult. I mean, my wife's Korean and there's a word in Korean that sort of describes sometimes negatively people of my age or our age. It's called konde. And it's like sort of, an individual who says, "Well, it wasn't like that in my day. You don't understand. I lived a tough life and you're just living an easy life." And that sort of mentality has this word in Korean to describe the style. But, and it is difficult because, every generation looks at another generation differently. And will maybe look at them and saying, "Well, I had tough times and you have it easy." If I look at the young generation today coming into a workforce, I probably wouldn't want to be them. I think it is tough in different ways because they have a whole different type of stress within them applied to sort of what is expected of them and their social environment and the pressure on them. So it's very difficult, but I think sometimes people are afraid to just go out and do something. And when I advise people coming into Korn Ferry at a sort of a high potential program who are the young starters, I always say to them, look, never expect Korn Ferry to give you anything. If you want something, do it. If you want to take on something, take it on and prove yourself. Don't wait for the organization to tell you to do it, because we won't. Our culture is not like that. And I think there is a need in young people to say, look, if you want something, just go and prove yourself, go and do it, take a chance, take a risk. And I think there's a slight risk aversion in many places. I think people have a view that society and including corporate organizations look after you. There's an expectation that they will put you in cotton wool and take you where you need to go. And ultimately, organizations don't do that. They may pretend to do it a bit. They may say, look, we create all these programs and we create sort of healthcare and wellness and all these types of issues that try to look after and make sure people are stable because it's important. But I think at the end of the day, that doesn't help people's careers. It may give them a nice environment to work in, and that's what people want. But I think ultimately in anything in life, if you want something, you've got to go and get it.
And my last question. I'm scared of retirement.
You and me alike.
Because to me, I need mission and purpose. I need a sense of belonging. I need to feel that I matter, that I'm valued. And so I think retirement for me is quite scary, because what am I going to do? Now, I've got some comparisons here, because I've got my stepfather who retired at 65 after 25 years in the same company, plays golf 3 times a week. Mum does yoga every morning. They live in Cyprus. They have a really nice life and a really nice social circle. And then my dad, who was in the oil and gas industry, that got to retirement and it almost killed him. So he had to keep working to keep having some sense of value and worth. When I look at that, what in the UAE, for example, people are kind of, you're out, aren't you? Unless you own a business, you can't be employed after the age of, is it 65 or 62 or something?
I'm not even sure. I mean, I think it's changing, but I think here it is changing, but depending on where you are within an organization, because obviously they have different visa systems now. So obviously there are changes to that, but I think it is difficult in the UAE. But if you are retired and you don't have a job and you don't have a golden visa, then it is difficult.
Do companies want people with that kind of experience to sit on boards, to be NEDs, to go into companies and try and bring value to them in ways that experience could lead to? Or is that not really much of a thing over here?
Oh, no, it is. Absolutely. I mean, governance is becoming absolutely critical. The public markets here are increasing both in UAE and the Tadao in Saudi. I mean, the Tadao has something like 60, 70 companies waiting for listing. So organizations here are looking at governance very, very seriously, mainly because they're looking for inward investment capital into their businesses. Now, and if you're a pension fund in the US, you're not going to invest in a company which has poor corporate governance. And so, yes, going forward, you'll see a very sharp increase in the amount of external non-executive directors who are coming into boards within the region, because those organizations need to be well governed from a board point of view. They need investment from foreign businesses, from pension funds, from venture capital, from private equity. And those businesses will only invest in organizations that they see as being well governed, which normally means having a good board.
So then how does the 65-year-old, the 60-year-old retired guy, I know at PwC they were all out at 61, I think it is, and so that's a really good example. Okay, PwC partners. I've got many of those that are friends of mine. They've gone into 61 years old. You're out. They get, I think, a 6-month period. They've got a bit of secondment after that, and then they're done. How does that person then find work as a NED? How do they become non-executive directors? How do they bring value to the market? And is that something Korn Ferry help with in any way?
We have a big business which is around non-executive directors. So yes, I mean, we have a board services business which helps companies build strong, well-structured boards, and that includes obviously the hiring of non-executive directors. So it is, and it is probably the most common question. If I meet someone who is late 50s, early 60s, they will always say, "How do I get on boards?" And because it's like you, it's a very natural question. How can I help? How can I bring value to a business? After I retire, how can I bring my knowledge, my experience, my global experience to an organization that will benefit them? And so the way that organizations are doing it, they will often use companies like Korn Ferry, and other Shrek firms around how do they identify someone with a particular skill set. Boards are structured. So a board these days will have, members who bring a certain particular skill set. And so for you will need to understand, why would a board want you? What do you bring that is specifically going to be valuable to that board? Now, maybe you're not a risk person. Maybe you're not the technology specialist, and they'll probably have some of those. So you need to say, what value do I bring that board? And then you need to be known when you are known, you're recognized obviously for what you do. And that could be a way an organization to say, well, we need someone who's a communications person, or we need someone who's good at building recognition of our business outside. And so there are ways in which your skills will be useful, and you can use companies like Korn Ferry who do that for a business.
It's interesting you say that, because I was looking at it from the other point of view. I actually could do with some Neds on a couple of my boards, and I'm looking for people at the moment, and it's very hard to find exactly what I'm looking for. So the fact that you offer that service, I didn't even know.
Yes, and it's not difficult to find people, because you actually need to first say, what do I need?
Yeah.
And then having done that analysis, then go out and find people. And it can be very enriching for people to do.
Absolutely. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great talking to you. I really appreciate you giving us your wisdom and your knowledge. And I think that a lot of people will take some great value from this. So thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.